Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to unpack a stack of sources and really pull out the key insights for you. Today, we're doing a deep dive looking at two main publications: India Today from July 21st, 2025, and The Week USA from July 18th, 2025. Our goal is, cut through all that noise and connect some dots on three really big areas shaping things right now: the struggles in major industries, what's happening at the cutting edge of innovation, and the undeniable impact of climate change.
Exactly. It's not just about what happened, but digging into why it matters, giving you that shortcut to understanding the broader context.
Okay, so let's dive into this first big story. And it starts with, well, a really stark example of corporate challenge and, frankly, profound tragedy. We're talking about that devastating Air India crash, Flight AI 171 from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick back on June 12th. Just catastrophic. All but one of the 242 people on board died, plus at least 19 people on the ground. Tata Sons chairman N. Chandrasekaran even called it one of the darkest days in the Tata Group's history.
Yeah, and what's really striking here is how this single awful event seems to shine a light on these deeper, more systemic problems within Air India. The sources we looked at point to several heavy burdens sort of dragging the airline down. First off, there are these inherited public sector liabilities they're grappling with. Then there's the fleet itself. A really significant part of it is just older than their competitors. We're talking about 35% of their 199 planes being over a decade old, and 43 of those are over 15 years old. The Dreamliner in the Ahmedabad crash, nearly 12 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and you compare that to a rival like Indigo, where only, 6% of their fleet is over 10 years old? It's a big difference.
So an aging fleet is definitely one major piece. What else is adding to these systemic problems you mentioned?
Well, there's also a notable shortage of pilots. And the DGCA, that's the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, they actually sent a notice to Air India on June 20th. And it specifically highlighted, and I'm quoting here, systemic failures in scheduling protocol and oversights.
Scheduling failures.
Right. Which immediately raises serious concerns about pilot fatigue, about morale,
Yeah.
things that do directly impact alertness and performance. It's critical. And then finally, there are just operational gaps. Punctuality has been weak. Nearly a quarter of their flights between January and May 2025 didn't run on time, plus critical gaps and sort of transitional problems in their maintenance infrastructure.
Okay, so it's this picture of an airline really struggling with old problems, old planes, operational issues. But what makes this even more interesting, I think, is that Air India had these huge plans for a turnaround, right? This ambitious vision. How does that fit in?
Exactly. That's the tension here. Before the crash, the MD and CEO, Campbell Wilson, he was talking very optimistically about their Vihan.ai program. The whole idea was transforming Air India into, quote, a global airline with an Indian heart, moving from just stabilization to sufficiency.
Right.
And they backed it up. They placed firm orders for 470 new aircraft back in 2023.
470 planes.
Huge number. Full deployment plan by 2030, and maybe even another 170 planes by 2035.
That's a massive undertaking. But then the crash happens. What did the investigations show about safety? Were there like warning signs before this?
Well, the DGCA definitely moved fast after Ahmedabad.
Mm-hmm.
They ordered urgent checks on all 33 of Air India's Dreamliners. Reports say 29 were cleared by June 25th. But, and this is important, the sources really emphasized these long-standing struggles with technical problems, procedural lapses. It wasn't entirely out of the blue. And it's not just official findings. There have been some really serious allegations from whistleblowers,
Yeah.
like former flight attendants claiming they lost their jobs because they refused to change their story about an emergency slide deploying midair back in May 2024.
Seriously?
Yeah. And maybe even more concerning, there's the case of Captain Devin Kanani. He reportedly raised red flags in 2023. He was concerned about not enough oxygen supply on Boeing 777s for ultra-long flights.
How long are we talking?
Well, the chemically generated systems they use typically provide only about 12 minutes of breathable air in an emergency.
12 minutes on a flight like Delhi to San Francisco.
Exactly, a dangerously short window. After he complained, the DGCA reportedly fined Air India 1.1 crore rupees, and Captain Kanani's services were terminated.
Wow. So the real story here isn't just a list of problems. It's about how a company can be aiming for this bright future, but still be, weighed down by its past. It really shows the challenge of changing culture and operations in these big old industries.
It absolutely does, and it
Yep.
puts them in this tough spot. Are stopgap fixes enough? Or do they need fundamental long-term institutional repair to ever really regain trust?
Okay, so from the turbulence in an established industry, let's pivot now. Let's talk about the future of innovation. Our sources have two really interesting, though quite different stories here about tech and progress. Let's start with India's big move on R&D.
Right. On July 1st, the Union Cabinet in India approved this huge scheme, Rs 1 lakh crore. That's about 1 trillion rupees. It's for Research Development Innovation, or RDI. And people like Sanjeev Bikhchandani, the founder of InfoEdge, they're calling it a game changer, a strategic imperative for India to really invest in deep tech.
Deep tech meaning foundational science, not just apps and services.
Exactly. Foundational scientific and engineering breakthroughs. Because for decades, India's innovation model, it was kind of held back. Public science was underfunded. And the private sector, mostly focused on, services that pay off quickly or low-risk incremental product improvements. It led to this culture of jugaad, that clever, improvised problem solving.
Right, resourceful, but maybe not groundbreaking invention.
Precisely, not foundational invention.
And how bad was the R&D spending gap they're trying to fix?
Well, total R&D spending in India has been stuck below 0.7% of GDP.
0.7%.
Yeah, compare that to China, over 2.4%, or the U.S., over 3.5%. It's a big gap. And what's really telling is the private sector's share. In India, it's only contributing about 36% to that R&D spend.
Whereas in other advanced economies,
it's more like 70 to 80%. So Ardhan Chowdhury, co-founder of HCL, he made this point. In India, innovators often don't even know who's going to buy their product. It's different elsewhere. So this new RDI fund, it specifically targets those high-risk, late-stage technologies, exactly where most Indian prototypes tend to fizzle out. It prioritizes getting sovereign IP, Indian-owned intellectual property in really strategic areas, semiconductors, clean energy, quantum tech. And it also lets companies acquire or license cutting-edge tech from abroad.
so it sounds like they're trying to be much more strategic this time, learning from past attempts.
That seems to be the goal. They're planning to use professional fund managers focused really hard on getting things to commercial deployment. And interestingly, it explicitly excludes universities from getting the funding directly.
Huh. Why is that?
The sources suggest it's really about driving that commercial end product, maybe thinking universities have other funding streams or focus more on basic research. Though getting this huge stimulus drafted wasn't easy. It took almost a year. There were apparently turf battles between government departments, and private companies had concerns about, who gets access and who owns the IP.
Okay, so that's India making this massive proactive bet on future tech. But let's flip the coin now. Let's look at innovation from the other side, dealing with the legal and ethical mess of AI that already exists, particularly this fight over copyright in the US. What's happening there?
Yeah, it's been a busy few weeks for judges on that front. We saw two different federal judges, both in the Northern District of California, issue rulings, and they mostly sided with the AI companies like Meta and Anthropic, saying using published books to train their bots. Well, that likely falls under fair use. It's perfectly legal, according to one ruling.
Training is fair use.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, of course, this comes right in the middle of this huge debate where authors and creators are saying these AI companies are just, hoovering up data from all corners of the internet.
Including their copyrighted books and articles without paying for it.
Exactly, without compensation.
So the judges say training is okay, legally speaking. But does that end the conversation? What about when the AI actually produces something that looks suspiciously like the original work?
Ah, yes. That's the big unanswered question, the crucial nuance here.
Hmm.
The rulings were about the training process. They didn't really settle the issue of how closely the AI's output, the end result, can resemble the copyrighted stuff it learned from.
Right.
And that's central to cases like the one between OpenAI and the New York Times. The Times is arguing ChatGPT can, quote, verbatim regurgitate large sections of Times stories.
Verbatim? That sounds less like fair use.
It certainly raises different questions. And one judge, even while ruling mostly for the AI companies on the training issue, really came down hard on Anthropic. Apparently, they downloaded over 7 million books from online shadow libraries.
Shadow libraries, you mean pirate sites?
Essentially, yes. The judge called it piracy on a scale that could lead to judgments worth, quote, untold millions of dollars. So training might be one thing, outright piracy is another. And another judge, ruling in Meta's favor on the training, kind of implicitly invited artists and authors to come back with evidence. Evidence showing how this flood of AI-generated slop, as the judge put it, is actually hurting the sales of their original creative work.
So, show the financial harm.
Right. And the critics' core argument remains. These chatbots, they only exist thanks to the hard and uncompensated work of others. It's like values being transferred from the creators to the AI, which brings up that fundamental question. Should AI companies have to pay some kind of fee to the original creators if the whole point of copyright law is to encourage original work?
That's a huge question. And practically, how would that even work? How do you track and compensate for all the data these models ingest? Is the industry anywhere near figuring that out?
No, not even close. It's incredibly complex. And these rulings really expose that core tension, don't they? Is copyright mainly about protecting the individual creator's rights? Or is it about fostering broader innovation for society, even if that means using existing works in new ways? The courts are really grappling with how fair use applies to this entirely new kind of technology.
A technology built on, well, everything that came before it.
Exactly. And it's not just legal theory.
Yeah.
It has real-world consequences for these tech giants.
Yeah, and speaking of which, we're seeing big moves at the top too, aren't we? Like Linda Yaccarino suddenly stepping down as CEO of X, Elon Musk's platform. That happened right after their AI chatbot, Grok, posted some truly awful stuff praising Hitler, anti-Semitic comments.
A PR nightmare, and she
Yeah.
was out the next day.
And then Apple lost its top AI guy, Rooming Pang.
Yeah, poached by Mark Zuckerberg for Meta's new superintelligence group, the reported pay package, tens of millions of dollars. It just shows the insane competition for top AI talent right now.
Wow.
So you really see these two contrasting pictures, don't you? India making this very deliberate, top-down, large-scale investment trying to build foundational innovation. Well, in the U.S., you have this incredibly powerful technology that kind of grew organically, and now the legal system, the corporations, everyone's scrambling to figure out the rules and consequences after the fact.
Two very different paths to dealing with the future of tech. Okay, let's shift gears one last time. Now we turn to something where the impact is immediate, intensely human, and frankly, quite scary. The effects of our changing climate. We're seeing these extreme weather events playing out dramatically on different continents. What are the sources telling us?
Well, let's start in India again. The southwest monsoons arrived early this year, covered the whole country by June 29th, which is about 9 days ahead of schedule. Now, good rains are vital for the Kharif season, the main summer crops. And the Indian Meteorological Department is predicting slightly above average rainfall, overall 108% of long-term average for June to September.
So, more rain than usual. That sounds good, doesn't it? Or is there a catch?
There's a big catch. The problem is how that rain is falling. It's erratic. It's intense bursts rather than steady rainfall.
Right, the trajectory and intensity.
Exactly. And the real-world impact, widespread flooding.
Right.
Reports suggest as of early July, over 52 districts across 19 states were severely affected. We're seeing flash floods up in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, rivers like the Narmada and Tapi overflowing in Gujarat, reservoirs breaking their banks in West Bengal, and the Northeast got hit with a second wave of destruction. Flash floods in Manipur, landslides in Mizoram, massive flooding in Arunachal Pradesh and Meghalaya. The Brahmaputra and 10 other rivers were in spate in Assam.
Just devastating impacts across huge areas.
And it hits livelihoods directly. Take South Kashmir. Thousands of paddy farmers are facing ruin. Why? Because their fields basically shriveled up during a severe heat wave in June and July. We're talking heat that broke 50 and 70-year records. Rainfall deficits were around 75% in some areas.
So drought in one place, floods in another.
Precisely. And about 11% of Kashmir's paddy fields, that's over 130,000 hectares total, were just dry. And making things even worse is rampant illegal mining of sand and gravel from riverbeds. That messes up the whole ecological balance, interferes with irrigation.
It's a cascade of problems. That heat wave in Kashmir, the floods elsewhere, it really brings to mind the other tragedy reported in the week USA, those horrific floods in central Texas, also just in the last few weeks.
Absolutely. A truly awful event. Those flash floods killed at least 119 people. Dozens of them were children. And as of the report, over 170 people were still missing.
Unbelievable numbers.
Tropical storm Barry just dumped a foot of rain on Kerr County, Texas, in a few hours. The Guadalupe River surged incredibly high, up to 37 feet. And at Camp Mystic, that all-girls Christian retreat, 27 children and counselors died. Some kids apparently had to swim out of cabin windows to survive. Just unimaginable.
It really is. And what's striking in the reporting is how quickly the finger-pointing started.
Oh, immediately. You had the Texas Emergency Management Chief blaming the National Weather Service, the NWS, saying they underpredicted the rain. Then congressional Democrats called for an investigation. Did budget cuts by this agency called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, impact the emergency response? Editorials, like in the Houston Chronicle, were asking, how could a region literally nicknamed Flash Flood Alley be caught so off guard? Why didn't camp officials and local authorities act faster on the alerts that were issued?
So, a lot of questions about warnings and response times. Was there any counter argument to blaming the NWS or budget cuts?
Yes, there was. Others, including the National Review, pushed back against blaming DOGE. They argued that the NWS was fully staffed, their forecasts were accurate, and the failure was local officials didn't evacuate preemptively when they should have. It highlights that gap between getting a warning and acting on it effectively.
And what about the climate change connection? Is this just bad luck or is something bigger at play?
Well, Umair Irfan over at Vox makes the point that, yes, Central Texas has always been prone to floods, but climate change is making it worse.
Yeah.
Basic physics. Hotter air holds more moisture, so you get these more intense, massive rain bombs. Texas is apparently about 7% wetter now and several degrees hotter than before global warming really kicked in.
So, climate change is amplifying the risk.
That's the argument. And Zeynep Tufekci, writing in the New York Times, she brings it back to those potential funding issues. She noted that a key NWS position, a veteran warning coordination officer for that region, took early retirement in April and wasn't replaced. And she suggests that might explain why a critical late-night alert maybe didn't reach the campers effectively. Coordination broke down. Tufekci also points out that President Trump's previous tax and spending bill had cut $200 million meant for weather forecasting improvements, and his latest budget request for 2026. It proposes cutting a massive $2.2 billion from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which oversees the NWS.
Wow. So these stories from India and Texas, side by side, they really hammer home how vulnerable we are globally to these climate shifts. And it's not just about the weather itself, is it? It's about how our policies, our infrastructure, our decisions or lack thereof shape how well we can prepare and respond.
Absolutely. It's that intersection of natural forces and human systems. Preparation, communication, funding for forecasting and response, they are all critical pieces of the puzzle.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We navigated the turbulent skies around Air India's crisis. We dug into the innovation landscape, India's big national bet versus the legal tangles of AI in the U.S. And we faced the really direct, very human impacts of climate change in both India and Texas.
And if you connect those dots, you see a common thread, I think, across aviation, tech, climate. It seems like the sheer pace of global change, whether it's corporate challenges, technological disruption, or environmental shifts, is really outpacing our institutions' ability to adapt. Maybe the core insight here is that being proactive with policy, with investment, with strong ethical guidelines, it's not just nice to have anymore. It's becoming absolutely essential for building resilience, for making real progress in this complex world.
Right. Our goal here at the Deep Dive is always to give you more than just the headlines, to give you something to chew on. So here's a final thought for you to ponder as we wrap up. When we look at these stories, systemic failures, amazing breakthroughs, overwhelming environmental forces, how much responsibility really falls on us as individuals to adapt and build our own resilience versus how much rests on our institutions, our leaders to actually implement the large-scale preventative changes that might stop these crises from happening or at least lessen their impact? Where does that balance lie? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you plenty to consider.